The West Bloomfield Fire Department is continuing their efforts to support firefighters all across the country. The Michigan Firefighters Association and West Bloomfield Fire Chief Greg Flynn stopped by the office of Haley Stevens in Washington last week to discuss a wide variety of topics and ideas. And here was some more information on that meeting, what it entailed, and what it means for the firefighters of our community. We have Fire Chief Greg Flynn joining us right now on The Splash. Greg, great to see you.
Jake, good to be with you.
Absolutely. Glad to have you with us. As always, really excited to be getting into this conversation. So let's just jump into it. What specific communications did the Michigan Firefighters Association highlight during this meeting with Representative Stevens?
Hey, Jake, the Michigan Association of Fire Chiefs had the opportunity to go in and have a real candid conversation with the Congresswoman about appropriations in the federal budget for the fire service, and really looking at how we fund the SAFER grants, which are opportunities for communities. Really, we're advocating for across Michigan, but you rightly framed that it also impacts the entire nation. But how our communities here in Michigan to increase their staffing of firefighters that can be in their engine houses, in their communities, ready to respond. We talked about the assistance to firefighter grants for equipment and getting appropriations for those, appropriations for the National Fire Academy and continuing the executive development and command development in fire investigator growth, all that happens at the National Fire Academy and the classes that they take on the road. So we spilled over into lithium-ion batteries and sprinkler systems and tax incentives for those builders that are putting these life-saving fire suppression systems in buildings and giving them incentives to do so, because we know all of these things, protection comes at a cost. And so we covered all of these, and Congresswoman Stevens, along with the rest of our 14 congressional reps in the state, were all eager to have a conversation with us, and we couldn't be more grateful.
Great. Glad to hear a lot of great conversations were to be had with Congresswoman Stevens. Lots of great topics to be getting into. How critical is federal investment in fire services sector for safety of both communities and firefighters themselves?
Well, the important thing to keep in mind is the fire service in general, and this is kind of a broad stroke, Jake, that just looking at how often people engage with the fire service. And honestly, in our community, very fortunately, this isn't a daily occurrence on the fire suppression side specifically. So funding for that, especially in our rural communities, can be very challenging. I think we've discussed on the show that a fire truck that used to cost, let's say, right around $450,000 to $500,000 pre-COVID, is now costing upwards of $800,000 to $900,000, almost $1 million for a standard engine pumper. So those types of things, those federal dollars can help these communities to offset some of that. And these are assets that are going to be 20, 25, 30-year assets. So we think it's a good investment in keeping all of our communities safe. And then those departments, as you've heard before, we network together with what we call mutual aid. And so we share those resources across community lines and, again, just create this fabric of safety, fire prevention across all of our communities.
Of course, and it sounds like a lot of the work that you guys are doing is not just to benefit the fire stations here in Michigan, but also to benefit fire stations all across the United States. And can you discuss some of the challenges that local firehouses are facing when it comes to maintaining or upgrading their equipment and infrastructure?
Sure. The technology that we use on the fire side and on our emergency medical services side is frequently going through upgrades and improving the services that we can render right there in someone's living room. So on the fire side, the real risk that we're looking at ensuring that we have the tools to mitigate are the stored energy fires, our lithium-ion batteries, our micro-mobility devices like scooters and e-bikes and one-wheels. in addition to all of those power tools and things like that that you're using the battery packs on. We discussed the need for legislation that there be some kind of standards set forth in some legislation. You can go online. Well, you can go to like a Home Depot and buy your replacement Ryobi or Milwaukee battery pack, let's say, for 80 or 90 bucks. Well, you could also go online and probably find 2 or 3 batteries for half that price from somewhere else. But we know that the quality behind those batteries and the probability of them going into what we refer to as thermal runaway, where those individual cells within the battery pack begin to combust, that's a real threat. And so we want to make sure that we are being smart in advocating for legislation that'll keep us safe on that technology front. And that even goes big, Jake. That goes into right here in West Bloomfield with the Tesla location here on Orchard Lake Road, and then the increase in electric vehicles in our community. Your fire department's going to be responsible if that thermal runaway takes place, and so we want to be prepared for that. And just quickly on the EMS side, we're constantly reviewing the technology, whether it's on our electronic patient capture, so how we're documenting and capturing the care that we provide in the front room and on the roads and all the way up to the emergency room. And also our devices that are monitoring oxygen levels, which is something that's been around for decades. But now we're looking at other things that we can monitor, not just blood sugar, not just carbon monoxide and dioxide levels. So we're looking at the whole spectrum of things and how we can continue to provide quality care, and this is the important part, Jake, that impacts clinical outcomes. We want to make decisions that we're investing dollars that are going to get people back to that pre-injury or pre-medical emergency state before they called 911.
Wow, that is a lot of great resources and a lot of great things that could help benefit the entire West Bloomfield community. For those just joining us right now on The Splash, we have Fire Chief Greg Flynn with the West Bloomfield Fire Department talking about his recent trip to Washington, D.C., along with the Michigan Firefighters Association for their conversation with Representative Haley Stevens. And how does the support from leaders like Representative Stevens help bring attention to the needs of the first responders at the federal level?
Well, first of all, we know that the Congresswoman, along with all of our representatives across the state, are eager to help. But I will tell you that Congresswoman Stevens is a highlight of our visit to D.C. in the sense that she and her staff always make time. She wants to meet with the fire chiefs, and so we're very appreciative of that. And she's always just so uplifting of our mission and what she can do to support that. And that's, I think, the takeaway that can be very challenging for all the advocacy groups that go either to the DC office or to the regional offices here in the state. Our congressional representatives are really, I believe, are trying to do the right thing with those federal dollars. And often it takes a minute. And while we might only get 25 or 30 minutes with them and we compress a lot of education in there, I think Representative Stevens, along with the other congressional reps, appreciate that time and appreciate that one-on-one so that they are making informed decisions and not just off of something on social media. And while those things can kind of heighten some awareness, really providing critical information that will support the legislation and really put our representatives on a firm platform when advocating for those dollars.
Of course, Representative Stevens is doing everything she can to make sure that every voice is heard. And it's important to have voices like you yourself, Greg, and the rest of the Michigan Firefighters Association to be speaking up on behalf of these firefighters. And how does the Michigan Firefighters Association work to ensure that the voices and the needs of firefighters are properly heard at the federal level?
Well, all of the advocacy groups in the state really do collaborate to ensure that the big mission critical items are being advocated for. This is I'm choosing my words carefully here because, I don't want to be involved necessarily with the politics, although it just inherently comes a bit with the position. But I do understand the intent behind some of the decisions that are being made here in our current events. And that's why it's incumbent upon myself, other chiefs, other advocates from the fire service to meet with our congressional representatives and ensure that they understand that these are real dollars going towards real technology, real people, real first responders that are creating critical outcomes in our communities. And I don't have a problem doing that. That is an easy thing for me to do when you look at the men and women of the WBFD 2 days in a row in the teens fighting fires in our community. They show up, they do their job well, and we continue to maintain a public safety readiness for additional stacked emergencies within our community with our mutual aid partners from Bloomfield Township and Waterford Regional and Southfield and Farmington Hills and all of our friends. So those are the types of things that the public safety professionals like the Michigan Association of Fire Chiefs and the Michigan Professional Firefighters Union and all these different groups, we need to educate, not have emotional arguments, but really educate on the outcomes that we have. And I think that's what's going to continue to deliver those federal dollars. And this is something that everybody can get behind and know that this is what good government looks like.
That sounds great to hear. Really appreciate everything that you're doing for the people of West Bloomfield. I got one more question for you, Greg, before we let you go. Moving forward, what can local communities do to support the efforts to secure more federal funding for fire services?
It's an easy one. When you run into Congresswoman Stevens and you're a resident of West Bloomfield or anybody within her congressional district, and you say, thank you. Thank you for meeting with Chief Flynn and the other chiefs. Thank you for listening to our first responders. And thank you for saying yes and supporting legislation that puts those first responders in the best position to create the best outcomes for our community. When the representative hears that that's what the people that elected her sent her to Washington, D.C., and they're giving her feedback, that they're happy with it and they know that their fire chiefs are showing up. And we represented all fire chiefs. Every fire chief in Michigan couldn't go to those meetings. So our voices were carrying the message of all fire chiefs in Michigan. And so those are the things that every citizen, every resident within those congressional districts can do with their representatives. And again, I underscore that. Thank you. Thank you for your service, and thank you for moving the mission forward on the public safety column. And of all of the many missions that they have, they do put that as a priority, and we're grateful.
Well, we thank Representative Stevens for looking out for the state of Michigan, and we thank you, Greg, for being such a powerful voice for the firefighters all across this state. And of course, we thank you so much for joining us today here on The Splash Live.
You bet. All the best.